The one thing I want to bring up before we exit this Google story is the sign behind me. The reason it says time, someone asked in chat why it says timing. I'm going to say this hopefully to inspire us to do stuff, not to be, I'm not trying to be pessimistic. I'm trying to be inspirational, but I'm bad at that. So I apologize in advance if it sounds pessimistic. But historically, some things happen. I won't say fully by chance. I mean, we make decisions as societies to get to places we are, but there's a timing issue right now that is critical. Right now, in the artificial intelligence world, right now is when AI engines are being, like AI engines that will be in control of much of our lives in the future. Right now is when they're being trained. Right now is when they're being developed. Right now is like, this is the point in humanity's history where AI is being germinated for real, not just in a science fiction book, but like, and I don't think we're anywhere close to like an AI that actually is self-aware and blah, blah, blah. I'm not a fan of people who think singularity is around the corner, but AI in the sense of machine learning that's going to take over a lot of our lives, we're laying that foundation right now. And I just want you to imagine something. Imagine that culture, that our current culture was actually in line with where it was in 1776. And that culture was training the AIs. Imagine how different those AIs would turn out. Instead of die people wondering about racism, the AIs would be focused on individual right. Like there's everything. People bring perspectives to things. And the technologists for a long time have been able to go off and work on technology without too much input from the humanities. We've been able to ignore the crazy leftists that took over humanities for a while. No one gave a crap because, you know what, the transistor functions or doesn't function regardless of what Foucault thinks. No one cares, right? But these people in the humanities are getting degrees in ethics. They're coming into AI and they are playing roles in how AI engines will be trained in the future. And so if you're interested in AI, if you're interested in ethics, now is the time to step up and be one of these ethicists. Like go into these, like companies need this. They do have real questions about how to train AI. We can't afford to have the die people train the AI that's going to be in charge for the next 100 years, because that's what's happening right now. We're in utero and someone's injecting certain chemicals into the fetus, and like we need to counteract that. We can't let Frankenbaby emerge from this AI. We need a counter argument here. We need like counter current to really make sure that AI does not turn into SJW AI, because it can and it will if we cede that ground to people like Timnit.
Yeah. I'm going to push back on something here because I know it's to allow you to address it. If the AI had been developed with the attitudes of 1776, it would have had contradictory code, because on the one hand, it would have been about individual rights, but it also would have been about slavery and how women can't vote. And I think that you actually might be able to argue that if they had developed AI in 1776, that we could have progressed. We might have progressed even faster because the AI would have said, "Wait a minute." Like we wouldn't have needed abolitionists, and it took heroic people like Frederick Douglass to point out that you're not living up to your ideals. We're not living up to our founding principles. But imagine if you had a computer you're inputting all this into, and it's like, wait, individual rights, slavery does not compute.
Right? Yeah. I mean,
individual rights, women can't vote, does not compute.
Yeah, and I want to be clear, when I say the culture of 1776, a lot of people look back and they say, well, the culture of the founding of America was about slavery. Not for everyone. For some of the southern states, but a lot of the northern states, even in drafting the Declaration of Independence, wanted, in fact, they pushed for and almost got but lost I think because of Virginia and was it South Carolina? Like they lost the clause they wanted in the Declaration of Independence about how slavery was immoral. Like slavery was not the idea that slavery was morally acceptable everywhere in the US at the founding is just false. That's just not true historically. Yes, there were places. But
we don't read enough about abolitionist thought.
There were lots of abolitionists, even at the founding. And I don't know if there was a majority, but there wasn't. It wasn't. They needed unanimous approval for the Declaration of Independence. So even if most of the states, I mean, there were arguments about, hey, we want to include this, and I think it was a couple southern states that were like, no, we don't want to. We won't vote if you do that. We won't vote for it. So like they were. The states that wanted the abolitionist clause needed to convince other abolitionist states, like, look, we gotta concede this point because we have to declare independence. We'll have to solve this problem later. But these guys won't join us, and we won't get this passed unanimously if we don't concede this point. They didn't want to concede the point. So the idea that like all the states were somehow these slave states that were pro-slavery is just false. It's just false. There were a hell of a lot of abolitionists, and I would hope that those would be the ones that would train the AI. So, but anyway,
that if podcasts existed back then, and that you would be encouraging them to go and, hey, abolitionists, make sure you're training the AI.
Right. So, anyway, yeah, who trains the AI will matter greatly in the future. So if you're interested, if you are a technical person, get involved in AI, and you're interested in AI, get involved in the ethics side a little bit. Just do something about the ethics side. And if you are in the humanities and you're interested in ethics, or you're interested in that kind of stuff, get yourself involved in AI, because you want to influence a lot of people. Help train AI. Make sure Google's AI isn't Skynet, like SJW's Skynet, which is where we'll go.